The moment I was reborn, faced with the unconscious and wounded Ethan Shaw, I made a swift decision. I ran. Life and death were matters of fate. Wealth and honor belonged to the heavens. In this life, bridges would return to bridges, roads to roads, we would each go our separate ways. I ran all the way home and threw myself into my mother's arms as she was cooking. The wave of emotion made my nose sting and my throat tighten. In my previous life, my parents were too proud to shame me. After I left for the capital with Ethan, they only visited twice. The first time, they had dressed in their best clothes, ones they had bought specially for the occasion. They brought along a wild pheasant they had hunted, black wolfberries they had picked, dried mushrooms they had gathered, and fresh fruit and melons from the countryside. They made the long journey just to attend my wedding with Ethan, but the Shaw family saw them as nothing but a joke. I would never forget the way my parents stood awkwardly at the door, trying to be respectful, trying to fit in, and for my sake, they bowed their heads again and again, saying, "Lena is a good girl, your family is respectable, please treat her well." When they left, they hugged me tightly, their eyes filled with tears. "Sweetheart," they said, "you're married now, don't worry about us anymore, just live a good life." I knew then that they were afraid. They worried that Ethan's family would look down on me, thinking I married above my place. The second time they came, it was just my father and my frail mother. She was already very ill. I still do not know how he managed to carry her all that way, only to see me from a distance. All I remember is turning around one morning in a narrow alley and suddenly feeling like something heavy had been torn from my chest. Later, I heard the devastating news. They were both gone when I returned home. The neighbors told me my mother had been diagnosed with a tumor. In just 6 months, they had spent every bit of their savings. The money for the train ride had been gathered by kind-hearted neighbors. Soon after they came back from the capital, my mother passed away. After he buried her, my father sold our old house and left behind a small amount of money for me. They had me late in life. I never brought them peace or joy. I only caused them pain. Meanwhile, I was trapped in the Shaw household, mocked and insulted by whoever felt like it. I took care of Ethan's parents, raised our son, and served my husband. The only thing anyone ever acknowledged me for was being hardworking and dependable. But none of that effort was for someone who truly loved or appreciated me. Even in the end, the only thing that sounded like regret was when my son said, "It's a shame Mom died so early, she didn't get to see her granddaughter." But what he really meant was that he lost the person who had always taken care of his child. The Shaw family, every single one of them, always acted superior. I spent half my life tangled up with them, and they spent that time looking down on me, yet depending on me all the same. That was my misfortune. Maybe heaven heard my sorrow and decided to give me another chance. This time, I would live only for my parents. Back in the present, my mother, slightly annoyed by how clingy I had become, told me to go knead the dough. I did not argue. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. She chuckled and said I must have been possessed, since I used to complain, act spoiled, and avoid chores whenever I could. When I heard that my father had returned, I ran out of the kitchen without hesitation. But the moment I saw who he was pushing in a cart, my heart sank, my face went pale. Lying on the hay was none other than Ethan Shaw, unconscious. My jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. If I had known, I would have let him fall into the river and drown without hesitation. "Sweetheart, come help your dad," my father called out cheerfully. I chased a rabbit down the mountain and ended up with a man instead. He had already applied herbal medicine to Ethan's wounds to stop the bleeding. Ethan had been running for his life, chased by someone trying to kill him. He had fled into our area and gotten stabbed twice, once in the shoulder and once in the back. His original bandages had torn apart during his escape, making the injuries look worse than they really were. Thankfully, there were no life-threatening wounds. With clean bandages, water, and food, he would recover. But I could not let Dad figure that out just yet. Pretending to help support Ethan, I reached into his coat and slipped out a badge from his inner pocket. "Wow, Dad, look at this. Doesn't it look like something a soldier would carry?" My father squinted at it. Then his eyes widened with excitement. "He is a soldier. I have seen guys like him driving military trucks through town. This looks exactly the same." I, Joe Miller, really did something big today. I saved a soldier." He turned toward the house, beaming with pride. "Let's carry him inside. Honey, go kill a chicken. He is badly hurt. We need to give him something nourishing." I stood there, stunned for a moment. I had forgotten how patriotic my dad was. To him, any soldier was a hero defending the country. I hurried to stop him. "Dad, he does not look like a regular soldier. What if he's on a secret mission? It might be dangerous to keep him here. We should tell the village chief. He can contact the authorities in town. Their place is much safer than ours." Dad paused, thinking it over. Then he looked at me, his eyes warm and serious. "Sweetheart, you really think things through better than I do." I sighed silently. That was my dad. Kind, honest, and always trying to do the right thing. He even went as far as piling extra straw over Ethan's shore to conceal him before taking him to the village chief's house. The chief did not ask a single question. He welcomed Ethan right away. When I got back home, I felt relieved. I had finally gotten rid of that burden. The chief's daughter had been married off long ago, so if Ethan felt the need to repay anyone, he could find someone else. I had no interest in being part of that equation. I started making plans for my future. I wanted to earn some money, buy study materials, and apply to college. In my previous life, before marrying Ethan, I had only completed high school. After moving in with the Shaw family, people constantly mocked me for being uneducated. Ethan told me to go to night school and promised he would help me find a job. I studied every moment I could, hoping to prove I was not useless. For the first time, I felt like I was making real progress. Then one day, I mentioned wanting to apply to college. The entire Shaw family shut the idea down immediately. They said if I failed the exam, it would be a waste of time and money, and if I passed, who would take care of Ethan's grandparents, who would cook and clean? To them, a girl from the countryside had no business dreaming of higher education. Back then, I relied completely on them. Even Ethan believed that family obligations came first. I had no choice but to lower my head and accept it. But once I had tasted the joy of learning, I could not stop. Over the years, even as people laughed at me and said I was pretending to be smart, the books in the Shaw household became my only source of comfort. Remembering those nights of quiet reading, I knew in this life I had to rely on myself. At that time, it was still possible to register for college entrance exams without a diploma. As long as I signed up, I could take the test. It was autumn now, and I had until the following summer to prepare. That gave me nearly a full year. My parents did not fully understand why I had suddenly become so determined, but they supported me without question. After thinking it over, I decided to sell dates and walnuts at the town market. We already had the ingredients at home. I just needed to buy some honey from the beekeepers next door, who kindly offered it at a discounted price. I mixed up half a sack of the honey-coated nuts and took them to the market. The first attempt did not go smoothly. Business was slow at first, but once people tasted the mix and realized how good it was, everything sold out. The price was lower than I had hoped. After all, this was a small town, and people were not eager to spend money. Still, my mother was overjoyed. We usually earned about 40 yuan a year. Making 6 yuan in one day was enough to feed our family for 2 or 3 months. After buying some groceries with my mom, we headed home. But just as we reached the yard, it felt like the sky had fallen. Ethan Shaw was standing there in the middle of our courtyard. The wall around our yard was not very high, and from a distance, I could already see the back of someone's head. When my mother noticed the stranger, she thought I was blushing from embarrassment. Then Ethan turned around. When his eyes met mine, they lit up. That scoundrel, he had always been the type to get bold ideas just from a glance. In my last life, it was because of my appearance, my face, my figure, that people gossiped and accused me of seducing Ethan. That was how I ended up marrying into the Shaw family. But the truth was, he had pursued me. I ignored him and walked straight into the house with the groceries. My father was in the middle of plucking feathers from a pigeon. When he saw me, he smiled and proudly told me he had caught it for Officer Shaw as a tonic. He added that Ethan had already achieved a leadership position at such a young age and would be leaving tomorrow. I finally let out a breath of relief. In my last life, he had stayed for nearly a month. This time, it seemed like he would be leaving much sooner. The village had loudspeakers everywhere. and word traveled fast. Every aunt and uncle who passed by wanted to sneak a peek after hearing that a man had come to our house. I used the excuse that I had plans to eat dinner at my friend Lily's place next door. I gave Ethan a quick nod and left immediately. That was when I learned the village chief really no longer had an unmarried daughter at home. But after hearing the news, his married daughter from the next village brought her younger sister-in-law over. The moment that girl saw Ethan, with his neat appearance and confident air, she threw a tantrum and insisted she wanted to marry him. Ethan did not seem interested. Coincidentally, my father happened to stop by around that time. Ethan told him he wanted to thank him, then asked to visit our home again. So, my father brought him back. Thank him, please, he was just using that excuse to get my dad to cook for him. So shameless, I stayed out until it was nearly dark, thinking he would have left by then. But as luck would have it, I ran into him on the road. His voice suddenly came from the side of the path in the darkness. I jumped like I had seen a ghost. I instinctively turned to run and almost tripped over a branch. Ethan moved quickly and caught me before I could fall. I muttered a quick thank you and tried to keep walking, but he called out, "Are you avoiding me?" I was, of course, but I could not admit that. "You are overthinking it," I said calmly. "We barely know each other. In a village like this, gossip spreads fast. I just do not want anyone getting the wrong idea. That is all." Ethan Shaw looked at me. He looked at me like he was half convinced, unsure whether to believe what I had just said. Then, after a pause, he asked how I had found his badge. So my father must have told him everything. The snap button on the inside pocket of Ethan's jacket was actually pretty secure. It was hard to believe the badge had just fallen out by accident. I brushed it off casually. I told him I had touched the pocket by mistake and pulled it out just to take a look. What if I had saved a spy or something? I said. He could tell I was running out of patience, but he also could not argue with my reasoning. In times like these, you really had to be careful. There were plenty of suspicious people out there. He said it was getting dark and offered to walk me home. I declined. I was used to walking country roads at night. Ethan left quickly this time. Before he did, though, he stopped by our house one last time. He thanked my dad for bringing him here, then turned to me and said that if I really wanted to go to college, he could take me to the capital. There were better resources there. And even if I did not get in, he could help me find a decent job. That was when I knew Ethan only had his eyes on me because he thought I was pretty. If not, why had he never made the same offer to the village chief's sister-in-law, who had been openly throwing herself at him? I gave my dad a hard look. Might as well let Ethan decide where to store the few coins we had left. I had not even decided for sure that I would apply to college. I had only mentioned it in passing. "Don't trouble yourselves," I said. "I do not even know if I will apply." Maybe Ethan was starting to get irritated with how many times I had turned him down. He did not say anything else. Sure enough, the village chief came around not long after with a suggestion. He said Ethan should take his daughter's sister-in-law to the city and help her find a good job. It did not have to be about marriage, as long as she could get out of the mountains and settle down with someone decent. It was still better than being stuck here forever. These days, just knowing the right person could change your life. No one could resist that kind of opportunity. I had not been an exception in my last life either. I heard later that Ethan had mentioned taking me to the capital, and the chief's daughter mocked me every chance she got. That was how things worked in the countryside. A rumor as small as a sesame seed could spread through the whole village in a single day. My parents were kind people. When others asked about it, they did not think much and told them everything. After seeing me make a little money, some of the villagers started copying me, selling dates and walnuts too, but it was not like there had been any secret to it. The town was small. Once too many people started selling the same thing, the profit disappeared. Making money was never easy. Our house was far from town, and most other goods were hard to sell. Watching me worry every day made my parents feel helpless too. We were not starving, but in the isolated northern villages, starting a small business required a lot of upfront costs, and if something did not need much investment, it was only a matter of time before everyone copied it and it stopped being worth the trouble. Even if I wanted to keep it up, I knew it would only lead to more frustration. So I bought a few practice books and started studying at home. If I could not save money, I would study hard instead. Once I got to the city, I could take my time and earn my way. Time passed quickly. As the new year approached, my aunt came to visit with my cousin and uncle-in-law. Our family was simple. Dad was an only child, and when Mom was 12, she had brought my aunt along with her and somehow ended up here by accident on a long-distance bus. My aunt had left home after middle school to work and eventually got married in the city. Every couple of years, she came back to visit. My cousin was not much into studying. He had dropped out after high school and was now working at a factory. He had only found a stable job last year. When he saw me studying, he seemed a little surprised. He did not understand much of what I was doing, but he complimented my handwriting. When my parents told him I was preparing for college, he immediately offered to help gather some materials and send them back with someone from the city. My aunt and uncle-in-law kept praising me for being ambitious, but after they left, the materials my cousin had promised never showed up. Instead, Ethan made a big gesture. A soldier showed up at our house carrying a box. He said it was a thank you gift from Ethan Shaw, a token of appreciation for saving his life. Inside the box, half of it was filled with study materials. The other half contained 2 rolls of fabric, a tin of snow cream for girls, and a sealed envelope. The envelope held 300 yuan. My parents were stunned. The letter said it was the new year and suggested we use the money to make some clothes. The fabric colors were clearly picked for women. I could not help but be wary of Ethan all over again. Dad asked me to write a thank you letter, so I did. I wrote that we appreciated Officer Shaw's support for the village and that I would share the study materials with others. As for the rest of the items, I wrote that I had already taken them to town and sold them. The money I earned from that alone was enough to support our family for years. I added that I was truly grateful. I had no idea what kind of expression Ethan Shaw had when he received my letter. In my past life, he had never done anything so dramatic. My father had saved his life, and this gesture was already more than enough to repay the debt. It felt amazing not to worry constantly about money. But what did not feel so good was how it suddenly seemed like the entire village had turned its eyes on our family. I did not let the gossip get to me. One day, while flipping through the local newspaper in town, I noticed a small announcement with an address for submitting stories to Northern Wind Literature. I figured there was no harm in trying, so I sent in 2 short stories I had written in secret. To my surprise, they replied. Not only did they accept both stories, but they also sent me a payment of 12 yuan as a manuscript fee and encouraged me to keep submitting more work. It was true what people said about big cities. They were full of opportunities. If you had talent and could connect with the right people, the money would eventually follow, so I kept writing while continuing my studies. Gradually, I began working on longer stories and submitted them regularly. When my editor found out I was preparing to apply for college, she mailed me a whole stack of study materials, much better than anything Ethan had ever sent. My parents had no idea how much money I was earning. They just assumed I was doing some light writing here and there. But in my heart, I was already making plans. Once I got into college, I would study hard for a couple of years, then bring my parents to the capital. I wanted them to have regular health checkups, and if I worked hard enough, I might even be able to buy a traditional courtyard house while prices were still within reach. If I could manage to buy a few properties early on, then in 10 or 15 years, I might actually be considered wealthy. News that I was preparing for college spread quickly through the village. Most people assumed I was still hung up on Ethan and planning to chase him to the capital. It was ridiculous, but they loved to talk. Everyone was just waiting for me to fail. Some even walked past our house just to throw out sarcastic remarks. Even my parents were dragged into it. Neighbors would joke that we were like rats pretending to be phoenixes. A few women said I had a seductive look about me and that if I got lucky and got into college, I would probably marry a high-ranking official. And if I did not, they said, an education alone would be enough to help me land a good husband in town or at the county seat. According to them, men liked girls like me. Just look at how the men in our own village stared. My mother nearly got into a few arguments with those gossiping women. As the exam approached, I could see the worry on my parents' faces growing deeper. On one hand, they were afraid all my hard work would amount to nothing. On the other, they were already dreading the day I might leave home. My parents were gentle people. Even when others treated them badly, they rarely fought back unless things went too far. The only exception was Ethan Shaw. After I returned from taking the exam in the county, more and more people began showing up at our doorstep. Some came out of curiosity. Others just wanted to see the girl who dared to believe she could transform into a phoenix and fly out of the mud. That was when I made up my mind. I was not going to wait a few years. As soon as I got my exam results, I would take my parents with me to the capital. The large bills Ethan had given us were still untouched, and in the past 6 months, I had earned 2 more from my writing. Back then, prices were not too high. You could rent a place for just 60 or 70 yuan a year. If my mom bought a sewing machine, she could make clothes and earn some income. My dad had a real talent for cooking. He was always experimenting with wild game he caught. If he could apprentice in a kitchen for a year or 2, with just a bit of money, 100 or 200 yuan, we could even open a small restaurant. In a few years, I might become the kind of wealthy woman people only dreamed about. When I told my parents all this, they thought I was being unrealistic. My mom said every housewife knew how to sew, so who would pay for handmade clothes? My dad admitted he was pretty good at cooking. In fact, villagers often asked him to cook at weddings and funerals. But how could his skills compare to professional chefs in big cities? I wanted to tell my mom that ready-made clothes were already being sold in cities. I wanted to tell my dad that in my last life, because of the Shaws, I had eaten in many restaurants, and very few of them were better than the food he made at home. Even with the limited ingredients we had in the village, he could create amazing dishes. But if I said all that, they would probably think I had lost my mind, so I dropped hints instead. I said I looked decent enough and that traveling so far from home on my own might put me in danger. That got them thinking. Over the next few days, I kept bringing it up. I talked to them about the possibilities. Little by little, finally, the exam results came out. Out of the entire county, only 13 students passed. 2 were from the town, the rest from the county seat. I ranked second overall. The news spread quickly. After all, the others had all attended high school, while I had taught myself everything. Just like that, our family became the focus of the county. That was when my parents finally started to hesitate. Someone from the county had reached out, expressing interest in arranging an engagement. They even suggested it might be best to finalize it before I left for college. And that was just one proposal. There were others, more outrageous ones, offering large dowries in exchange for a promise that I would give them a healthy son. In just 2 short weeks, I lost track of how many marriage proposals we had turned down. With all that attention came a shift in how people saw me. The rumors started again. Some whispered that I had already slept with that military officer. This time, the gossip spread even faster, especially among those who had seen me before. They insisted that just looking at my figure was proof enough. I was not a virgin. My parents were furious, ready to break someone's jaw if they could. But I knew it would not change anything. In a place like ours, where gossip spread faster than the wind and word of mouth was all people trusted, once someone started calling you a seductress, it was only a matter of time before others accepted it as truth. Even the village chief came to our house, asking my father if Ethan Shaw had refused his daughter's sister-in-law because of me. The chief was one of the few people my father truly respected. When my father was an orphan, it was the chief's grandfather who gave him his first hot meal. But now, when the chief looked at me with suspicion, his tone hinting that I was not the kind of girl who knew her place, my father finally reached his limit. Those words did not hurt me, but I could see how much they were tearing at my parents. In our past life, they had endured years of gossip and slander. When Ethan left them, he gave them 500 yuan. When we got married, the Shaw family offered a dowry of 1,000 yuan. After that, they pressured me to save every penny and secretly send money back home. Thanks to that, my parents managed to live decently, but people kept borrowing from them. And some even snuck in over the wall to steal what little they had. My parents could do nothing but accept the losses. The village turned a blind eye. No one said a word. In just a month, what should have been a joyful new chapter left my parents bitterly disappointed in everyone around them. I added to their frustration, pushing until they finally agreed to come with me to the capital. I got what I wanted, but I could not let myself celebrate yet. I knew that once they settled in, they would see how much better life could be in the city. In a place like that, slander could be reported to the police, neighbors minded their own business, so I packed early and left with my parents more than half a month ahead of schedule to find a place to live. They were clearly nervous, just like before, but I was in high spirits. This time, we were leaving for a better life together. They were surprised by how confident and cheerful I became once we left the village. I smiled, patted my chest, and told them, "This is just the beginning of our good life." We rented a small traditional courtyard house not far from Jinghua University. It had one large room that we divided into a bedroom for my parents, a living room, and a side room with a small kitchen, which became my bedroom. The rent was 67 yuan for the whole year. My parents hesitated to spend so much, until I pulled out a large banknote. They stared at it in shock. I told them it came from the manuscript fees I had earned. They did not really understand what that meant, only that I had been writing non-stop at home. I explained that my publisher was located right there in the capital, and that I would be earning even more soon, once we were settled in. My first priority, before school even started, was helping my parents find steady work. Getting a job for my father would be easier. I remembered a restaurant from my previous life called Shongjiangshan. It had just opened. It was high-end and only served a limited number of guests per day, by reservation only. That meant the workload would be manageable, and the environment would not be too harsh. At first, the manager barely looked at us. He seemed ready to kick us out. So I pulled out 50 yuan and made a bet. If my father's cooking was not good, they could keep the money, but if it impressed them, they had to consider hiring him as the head chef. My father blushed, stammering that I was just joking. He had been a farmer all his life, someone who worked with his hands and cooked during village festivals. That restaurant looked so elegant, he never even dared to glance at it when walking by. And now, all of a sudden, he was the center of attention. I held his hand and asked, "Those 2 dishes I ordered the other night, weren't they delicious?" He hesitated, then gave a quiet nod. "They were pretty good," he admitted. Though I could tell he still doubted himself. Even the cold appetizer served at that restaurant could not compare to his cooking. He saw the confidence in my eyes. Slowly, he gathered himself and stepped into the kitchen. I watched as he handled the knife with ease, moving through each step with steady hands. The manager turned to me and asked if my father had ever worked as a chef, and what his specialty dishes were. I told him he was more of a self-taught cook, but he could handle just about anything. Wild pheasant, boar, goose, pigeon, rabbit, fish, he could cook them all beautifully. He even brewed his own wine, rice wine, clear grain liquor, plum wine. The aromas alone could make your mouth water, and his homemade vinegar had a bold flavor you would not forget. Plenty of villagers knew how to cook and brew, but none did it as well as my father, not even close. The manager looked surprised, probably thinking I was exaggerating. And to be fair, my father struggled with the gas stove at first. He had no idea how to use it. That did not help our case. Fortunately, someone showed him what to do, and he picked it up quickly. Once they tasted his cooking, they hired him on the spot as the head chef, 45 yuan a month, plus commission. If he created new dishes, they would negotiate extra pay. On the way home, my father was still in a daze. He had never imagined he could earn so much just by cooking. Back in the village, it never occurred to him that it was even a skill worth mentioning. But the truth was, he had always loved it more than anyone else. He went hunting every few days just to try new ingredients and test out new recipes. He truly had a natural talent for it. With Dad's job now secured, it was time to think about something for Mom. She wanted to do what many of the local women were doing, set up a street stall to sell food, but both Dad and I felt that might not be the best idea. Dad said he was earning enough and that Mom did not need to work, but Mom was never one to sit still. Back in the countryside, she had always been strong and capable. Aside from not being quite as skilled in the kitchen as Dad, she could handle almost anything with ease. I took her around the city for 3 days, visiting clothing shops and tailoring businesses. After observing and comparing, we bought some fabric and thread to bring home. Then, Dad and I went out secretly and purchased a sewing machine. It cost 120 yuan. When Mom found out, she was heartbroken about the price. Dad had hesitated too, until I told him that even a simple cheongsam in a boutique could sell for 60 or 70 yuan. His eyes widened in disbelief. He knew how good Mom was with her hands. She could recreate any design just by glancing at a magazine. In our village, even a 5 yuan piece of clothing was considered pricey. With a sewing machine, everything would be much easier for her. I asked Mom to start by making a cheongsam, then had her sew a Western-style dress based on a design I had chosen. On our way to Funang Boutique, people kept stopping us to ask where I had bought the clothes. Mom beamed with pride. Funang was a ready-to-wear shop that also took custom orders. When the shop owner saw me walk in, her eyes lit up. I had Mom take out the cheongsam, an elegant green dress embroidered with delicate black peonies and finished with pearl buttons. It was graceful and refined. I explained to the owner that although Mom could not read much yet, she had a keen eye for patterns and color. Mom quickly added that she was determined to learn and would study hard if given the chance. Honestly, with her skills alone, many shops would have gladly hired her. But I had a feeling she was destined for something greater. In a few years, Funang would become a high-end custom clothing brand. Working there would give her a chance to grow and learn even more. The owner offered her a 1-month trial with a salary of 10 yuan. If she was hired permanently, she would earn 30 yuan a month, plus a 15 yuan commission for each dress sold. When we got home, Mom was so excited that she forgot to eat dinner. She immediately grabbed the fashion design books I had bought and buried herself in them, flipping back and forth with a dictionary in hand. All of a sudden, I felt like I had become the least important person in the house. Before the school year started, I finally met my editor, Grace, whom I had only known through letters. When she learned that I was from a rural village and had been accepted into Jingo University, she was stunned, and when she found out that I had brought my parents with me, she looked like she wanted to say something, but held back. The next day, Grace came to our home to discuss the idea of publishing a short story collection. When she saw the dress Mom was working on, she could not stop complimenting it. After a pause, she asked if Mom could make one for her too, saying she would pay and even offering a 60 yuan deposit upfront. Mom was so surprised that she quickly declined, saying she could not take money from one of my friends. After going back and forth for a while, she finally gave in. But only if Grace agreed not to insist on paying. I had to step in and tell Grace to just let it go, or Mom might never invite her back. That was the only way to get her to put the money away. I reassured her, "Do not worry. My mom is working at Funang now. You will have your dress soon." I added that if she liked the dress, maybe she could help spread the word. Grace's face lit up. She ended up staying at our house until after 9 in the evening. Since around 7, Dad had arranged for someone to bring home dinner for me and Mom. Seeing that, I invited Grace to join us and try some of Dad's cooking. Even though the food was no longer hot, Grace ate like she had not had a proper meal in years. Luckily, I had asked Mom to prepare extra dumplings earlier, or we might have had to fight her for the last one. I also brought out some homemade plum wine that Dad had brewed. It was light and would not make anyone drunk. After a few glasses and a full stomach, Grace started chatting cheerfully, saying again and again that it was the best food she had ever eaten. Mom could not stop laughing and was clearly charmed. Grace was a university graduate, came from a good family, had a stable job, and was quite attractive too. When Mom found out she was the editor who had accepted my stories and helped me earn money, she instantly adored her. We did not have a phone at home, so Grace called her older brother to pick her up. But when I saw her brother, I froze. I remembered him clearly from my previous life. It was at a wedding the Shaw family had attended. Most of the guests were military officers, but her brother had been the only businessman there. I had seen him more than once at the compound. People often looked down on businessmen, but that day, every man of his generation raised their glass to toast him. He barely drank, yet no one seemed to mind. Even Ethan Shaw had greeted him with respect. They clinked glasses and each drank half. I had been sitting at the women's table, directly across from him, and overheard quite a lot. I remembered his last name was Chu. People said the Chu family had been involved in politics for generations. But there were two black sheep in the family. One of them was this very Chu. He had refused to rely on family connections and had no interest in politics. Instead, he chose to become a businessman. In just a few short years, he built a business empire worth hundreds of millions. Though he was constantly scolded by his elders for it, there was even a rumor that he once got into a shouting match with his father, yelling that he did not care if capitalists were condemned. He was determined to become one anyway. Later, when the country faced a crisis, he donated 2/3 of his fortune and was practically hailed as a hero. People might look down on businessmen, but when faced with someone who had both wealth and powerful roots, no one dared say a word. For a second, I wondered if I had imagined all of this. With both my parents now working, they seemed more full of life than ever. To my surprise, they had even started studying at home. Dad said his customers were all educated people, and he did not want to embarrass himself. Mom said making beautiful clothes meant understanding fashion, and for that, she needed to read more. Somehow, I had become the least busy person in the house. On the first day of school, I walked through the gates of Jinghua University, the same campus where I had once delivered clothes to Ethan's sister in my past life. But this time, everything felt different. This was truly my college life now. For once, I felt like I was really living. I had just received permission from my professor to live off campus. As I wandered around afterward, I unexpectedly ran into Ethan Shaw and his sister, Aaron. I wanted to pretend I did not see them and keep walking, but Ethan had already quickened his steps and stopped right in front of me. "Lena, why didn't you tell me you came to the capital?" he asked. His question caught me off guard. It meant he already knew I was here. He probably even knew my parents had come with me. He must have been asking around non-stop. Just how nosy could someone be? "I didn't want to bother you," I said. "Thank you again for the study materials and the money. They really helped my family. Could you give me your address?" I added. Ethan looked a little embarrassed. "Of course. Are you planning to visit me?" I smiled politely. "If I get the chance, I would like to stop by and thank you properly." He smiled at that and said, "If you need anything, do not hesitate to ask. And if your parents are looking for work, I can help with that too." That was when Aaron, who had been watching me with suspicion the whole time, finally spoke. "So this is the girl from the countryside you have been helping. In our past life, Aaron had never liked me. She always looked down on me, thought I was not good enough for their family, and never missed a chance to throw subtle insults my way." Ethan quickly turned to me, clearly flustered. "Do not take it the wrong way, of course." I knew he had not said anything rude. This was just Aaron being Aaron, trying to provoke me. I smiled. "I am very grateful to Mr. Shaw for his generosity, but my parents already have jobs, so they do not need help." I handed over a notebook. "Would you mind writing down your address?" Aaron's tone turned sharp and mocking. "Already asking for his address? Sounds like trouble is on the way." Ethan's expression darkened. He handed me the pen and said firmly, "That's enough, Aaron. Keep your mouth shut." Then he turned away and muttered that his sister was still young, spoiled, and too used to getting her way. I shook my head and said it was fine, then excused myself, saying I had something to take care of. As I walked away, I could still hear them behind me. Aaron was fussing, saying she would go home and tell their parents that Ethan was losing his mind over some village girl. She even accused me of dressing like a seductress, claiming I knew how to tempt men. Ethan kept trying to quiet her. With so much going on, I had completely forgotten that Aaron had just started college this year too. I needed to pay back the money Ethan had given me as soon as possible. If I did not, who knew what kind of drama Aaron might stir up next? Campus life was wonderful. The coursework felt manageable, and being surrounded by so many young people made me feel lighter and happier. At first, some of my classmates had their doubts about me. They looked at my appearance, heard I was from a village, and did not know what to think. When they learned I had brought my parents to the city, some even pitied me. But when they saw how well I dressed, like a city girl through and through, they began to feel unsure again. Those feelings eventually faded as we spent more time together. I even became like a big sister to a few of them. My royalties had not come in yet. I would have to wait until next month. For now, I only had a little over 400 yuan. I wanted to gather at least 600 to pay Ethan back, more if I could manage. Making an extra 10 or 20 yuan was easy, but saving up several hundred was a different challenge. When Grace came to visit, I asked if she knew any quick ways to make money. She asked why I was in such a rush. I was a college student now, and both my parents had jobs. What could be so urgent? I explained the situation with Ethan. Grace frowned. That Shaw family has issues. Your dad saved his life. Even if it was a few thousand yuan, he still owed that, and now he is acting like giving you a little help is some grand act of charity. I tried to calm her down. It was his sister who said those things. She probably thinks that since I am from the countryside, I must be trying to get close to her brother for personal gain. It is not hard to understand. Grace rolled her eyes. Understandable. You are completely normal and talented. Your parents are amazing. And you are telling me you are not good enough for some soldier? Please, you are way out of his league. Then she looked at my figure, then my face, and added, honestly, I never really understood why people said I was not good enough. Just look at you. I told Grace. The truth was, the Shaws came from old government compound families. For people like them, background and family name meant everything. That was just how their world worked. But the more I explained, the more agitated Grace became. Eventually, she remembered that Ethan had only given me 300 yuan and a few supplies. Nothing extravagant or sentimental. Why are you even stressing over it? She asked. It's not like you owe him a fortune. That was when I realized I probably had not made myself clear. I want to pay him back, I said. Maybe 300, maybe even 500 or 1,000. Just to be safe. After that, I can focus on my own plans. Grace slapped her thigh. 1,000, that's nothing. I can lend you 2,000 right now. At that moment, I knew I had guessed right. Grace was even wealthier than I had thought. My lips twitched. I want to repay him, I told her, but I also want to earn the money myself. It is not an emergency. She studied my face for a few seconds, then leaned in close, her expression full of mischief. All right. I will keep an eye out for job opportunities for you. I laughed and told her not to worry about it. I was just tossing ideas around. But in truth, the thought of Aaron Shaw still felt like a ticking time bomb. It made me uneasy. Later that day, Grace was waiting for me at the school gate. She pulled me into a car, and when I looked toward the front seat, my heart skipped a beat. It was him, just as I had suspected. One of the siblings had taken the father's surname, the other the mother's. Either way, Grace had clearly landed herself a powerful relative, and a very influential one at that. Her brother was named Daniel Chu. With a name like that, no one would have guessed they were family. Grace explained that he was a grandson from a different branch of the family, so he did not get to use the main surname. Daniel Chu glanced at me through the rearview mirror. You seem cheerful today. I tried to suppress my grin, waving my hand. Not really. You look like someone who just hit the jackpot, he said. I smiled. Well, being around you too does feel kind of lucky. He looked confused for a moment, then chuckled. Grace teased me, saying I did not take my writing seriously anymore and was always thinking of ways to make money. Then Daniel Chu offered me a job, teaching at a local orphanage, 2 classes every Sunday, 200 yuan per class. I hesitated. Something about accepting money for that felt wrong, like I would be profiting from kindness. It made me uncomfortable. Later, I talked things over with Daniel. I told him I would be happy to teach the orphanage classes, but I did not want to be paid. I also said I would be open to other work if something came up. Then Ethan chimed in, completely blunt. I have money. If you have time, just hang out with me. Help me relax. For a second, I thought I had heard him wrong. But it was not until he actually picked me up to go to the orphanage that I realized he had meant it. He really just wanted me to keep him company. Something about the whole setup felt strange, but I could not quite figure out what. When I saw him parked at the entrance of the alley, I froze. He sat in the front seat like a boss, and I felt like his personal driver. I forced a smile and got in. The whole ride was painfully awkward. My mind was spinning. At some point, a crazy thought crept in. Daniel Chu might have feelings for me. Not that I thought too highly of myself, but in my past life, people in the compound were always watching Ethan Shaw, waiting for him to leave me and marry someone more suitable. As for Daniel Chu, I had never heard of him getting married. He was the type of man who could snap his fingers and have women lining up for a chance. If he ever snapped his fingers for me, no, I quickly reminded myself. This life was about being independent. I was not going to rely on anyone. Still, I caught myself stealing glances at his profile and immediately felt annoyed at my own reaction. I should not have told Grace anything. Ever since we left the orphanage, something had felt off between us. All afternoon, I had fun playing with the kids, but every time I looked at Daniel Chu, I felt uneasy. "Are you tired?" he asked as we were leaving. "Want to grab something to eat?" I shook my head quickly. "No, thanks. My dad already made dinner." The silence in the car after that was heavy, almost unsettling. When we were nearly home, he suddenly pulled over to the side of the road. At first, I thought he had made a wrong turn. There were still 2 streets left before we reached my house. "What are you thinking about?" I lowered my hand, which I had raised to point the way. For some reason, my heart started pounding. "Nothing. It is just that my place is still 2 streets down." Daniel Chu turned to face me, his eyes locked onto mine. He had been to my house 3 times. He definitely knew where it was. A strange pressure built up in my chest, and out of nowhere, I felt like crying. Just days ago, everything had felt normal. Now, something had changed between us, and I did not understand why. "Yeah," his voice was calm, but I was suddenly incredibly nervous. "Get a grip," I scolded myself. Between this life and the last, I was practically 60 years old. Why was I losing my composure over a man barely older than me? I tried to collect my thoughts, but when I finally opened my mouth, everything came out wrong. I feel like maybe you have certain intentions toward me, but I am just a student. I do not think about things like that." Daniel Chu let out a quiet laugh, clearly amused. "What kind of intentions? Like keeping a mistress or something?" My voice was barely louder than a whisper, but I forced myself to say it. "If that is what this is about, then please do not waste your time. I am not interested. I would never agree to something like that." I could sense him shift beside me. He had been lounging casually in his seat, but now he sat up straight, the tension in the car suddenly thick. The silence felt unbearable. "I will get out here," I blurted. "Thanks for the ride." I reached for my seatbelt, but his voice cut through the stillness, cold and sharp. "Sit down. I will take you home." He did not say another word for the rest of the drive. When we finally arrived at the alley near my house, I thanked him again. He gave no response. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the gate. His car did not move until he saw me enter. Only then did he drive away. That night, I had a strange dream. Daniel Chu appeared in it. He made me kneel at his feet and scolded me for being ungrateful. I woke up thinking it was the most absurd dream I had ever had. The next day, Grace came by to drop off some money. She could not stop complaining about her brother. She said he came home in a terrible mood the night before and refused to speak to anyone. At lunch, he sat there with a blank expression, and when their father asked him a question, he gave a cold, one-word reply. Their father got so angry he actually took a whip to him. I was horrified. He hit him. Grace just sighed. "Yeah, my dad can be intense, but honestly, my brother kind of asks for it sometimes. He has always been like that, stubborn. Never bows to anyone, always looking for a fight." She explained that their father already had issues with both of them. One became a businessman, the other went into publishing. Luckily, she was a girl, so her choices were not judged as harshly, but Daniel was constantly butting heads with their father. "When he is in a good mood, they can talk like normal," she said, "but when he is not, he shuts everyone out, and if both of them are in a bad mood, it is guaranteed Daniel will get punished." She told me the worst part was not even the whipping, it was that afterward, Daniel still had the nerve to say, "If you have the guts, then kill me." Their mother ended up crying in frustration. That was the only thing that finally calmed everyone down. Hearing all of this made me feel uneasy. The punishment sounded far too severe. "Wait, did you just say the magazine is yours?" I asked suddenly. Grace blinked. "Did I not mention that?" "No," I said, taking a deep breath. It explained so much. Why she was always so confident, so at ease. She was beautiful, well-educated, ambitious, and independent. I could never measure up to her, not even in this lifetime, but having a friend like her still felt like an incredible stroke of luck. Even so, taking that 400 yuan paycheck now felt a bit awkward, but Grace just waved it off. She said she was only delivering it, and if I had any concerns, I could talk to her brother. I thought about it for a moment and let it go. It was too awkward anyway. Maybe Daniel Chu had been in a bad mood because of me. Even just a little, I had touched a nerve by confronting him. He had not said anything, but I could imagine how embarrassed he must have felt. I decided it was best not to see him again. I would find another way to earn money. I placed the money in an envelope and handed it quietly to Ethan Shaw at school. Once again, I thanked him sincerely. I did not want to owe anyone anything, not even a favor, just in case. For a brief while, life settled into a rare moment of peace. Aside from my studies, I focused on writing my new novel. There were still small disturbances now and then. One day, on the way to class with a few classmates, we ran into Aaron Shaw. She was walking arm in arm with another girl, speaking loudly about shameless village girls trying to seduce men and climb branches they did not belong to, hoping to become phoenixes. Her words were so pointed that even my classmates understood who she was talking about. As I passed her, I looked at the flowers by the path and muttered, "Idiot," just loud enough. Aaron stormed over and grabbed my sleeve, but I was in no mood to be polite. I shook her off without hesitation and walked away, leaving her shouting behind me like a woman gone mad. I really wanted nothing to do with that family, but gossip was impossible to avoid. Before long, rumors spread on campus that I had gotten into college by sleeping with someone. Some students even came by our classroom just to see what I looked like. Afterwards, they were even more convinced. "She looks exactly like a seductress," they whispered, "and she is from the countryside. No way she scored high enough to get in on her own." Soon, boys began slipping obscene love notes into my desk. Word spread that I had 2 or 3 boyfriends already. All I wanted was to shut them up with my achievements. Final exams were approaching, and I figured the best thing to do was wait for the results. Real grades would speak for themselves. Meanwhile, my mother was swamped with work. She had taken on an urgent order from a wealthy client and came home late every night. My father told me not to wait for dinner and just eat at the restaurant. Ever since I helped name a few dishes and came up with some catchy slogans while taste testing new items, the manager at Coma.Everyone lit up every time he saw me. And when he heard that other restaurants were trying to recruit my father, he started treating us even better after that. Whenever I stopped by the restaurant, the staff welcomed me like family. Sometimes, if they were short on help, the head waitress would ask me to lend a hand. I never minded. By then, it felt natural. But my unfortunate tie to the Shaw family was not done haunting me. One evening, on my way there for dinner, I unexpectedly ran into all of them: Ethan, Aaron, their parents, and Ivan Yao. In my past life, the Shaws had tried to pair Ethan with Yvonne Yao. She had made my married life a living nightmare. Ethan had always told me to endure it, swearing up and down that he would never divorce me. Looking back, I should have walked away the first chance I got. Aaron noticed me right away and must have whispered something to their parents, probably assuming I worked there as a waitress. Mrs. Shaw lifted her chin and gave me a look of pure disdain, the kind that dripped with superiority. I glanced at them, confused. What was wrong with these people? The main dining area at Coma.Everyone was not very big, divided by bamboo partitions. Ethan and Yvonne were seated together, separated from the others. Mr. and Mrs. Shaw and Aaron were positioned so they had a full view of the room's center. When Aaron pointed at me and called over a server, I sighed and walked straight into the kitchen. I was not expecting her to make a scene, but I heard the noise before I even stepped back out. Aaron had slammed her chopsticks down and was scolding a waitress. If she is not a waitress, then what is she? I insist she serves us today. I stepped forward and gently pulled the flustered waitress aside. Ethan looked visibly uncomfortable when he saw me and muttered an apology under his breath. Mrs. Shaw shot him a cold glance before turning her glare on the waitress. Did Manager Jiang not say this was supposed to be a high-end place? She snapped. When you have rude customers like this, you should throw them out immediately. Aaron looked pleased with herself at first, clearly thinking she had embarrassed me. But the moment I opened my mouth, her expression tightened. Mr. Shaw, used to being treated like royalty, looked visibly annoyed. The glare he gave me was full of warning. He immediately demanded to see the restaurant manager. Aaron started shouting that I should be kicked out. When a staff member clarified that I was not an employee but had just come to see my father, Aaron shouted even louder, insisting my father should be kicked out too. Well, I said calmly, so this is what it looks like when the great Colonel Shaw throws his weight around, dragging his whole family out to bully regular citizens. As Aaron and Mrs. Shaw hurled more insults, I realized I had had enough. If they wanted a scene, I would give them one. Go straight for the head. The dining room had gone quiet, the guests around us staring, whispering. Then I raised my voice just enough to carry, "There is a military officer here." A hush fell over the room as everyone turned to look. Mr. Shaw froze for a moment, then turned his eyes to me. "Young lady," he said coolly, "watch your words, throwing around accusations like that. Do you really think you can handle the consequences?" I gave a small, cold laugh. "Is that a threat, Colonel Shaw? Because I have a clear conscience. I do not fear ghosts knocking at my door." Aaron looked ready to explode, especially when I calmly said I would call the police. "You hillbilly," she spat, "you really think you can stir up trouble in the capital just because my brother helped you out a little? You think he is going to marry you? You reek of poverty. A girl like you deserves nothing. And this family, it is not even up to him." Enough. It was Ethan who finally spoke, his voice sharp and low. "I am sorry, Lena, my sister is spoiled. Please do not take it to heart." I had heard that exact line too many times in my last life. I had swallowed more humiliation than I could remember. I looked at him, my gaze icy. "If your sister cannot grasp basic human decency, then let me make it clear. Since the entire Shaw family is present, Aaron has been spreading rumors about me on campus. She has been telling people I got into college because of Ethan, that I seduced my classmates, and seduced her brother. Her slander has damaged my name. Once exams are over, I will file a report with the police and let the authorities decide the consequences for malicious defamation." I turned to the room. My college entrance scores were earned fair and square. I do not know what supposed favors I received from the Shaws. And Colonel Shaw, instead of throwing your status around here, maybe focus on how you plan to get your daughter out of legal trouble. The Shaw family looked stunned that I would say all this so openly. Their faces darkened with rage. Mrs. Shaw glared at me, her tone cold. "How noble of you, preaching about independence. Your whole family barely made 50 yuan a year back in that village. Without my son's help, how would you have even left those mountains? What about the study materials? Do you think you could have bought those yourself? My son dragged your family out of poverty, and now you act like repaying him means you owe nothing. You should feel ashamed." Her words were harsh and cutting. But I, Lena, had my pride too. Before I could say anything, Grace stepped forward from where she had been standing quietly by the wall. Her voice was calm but firm. "Mrs. Shaw, that is quite the story." She scanned the room slowly before speaking. "I am Grace Chu. I have been Lena's publisher for the past 4 years. She has been earning 70 to 80 yuan per month in royalties long before she ever moved to the city. Are you saying a published writer cannot afford her own study materials?" Her sudden appearance startled me. I had not even noticed she was there. I glanced past the bamboo divider and met her sharp eyes, which sent a jolt through my chest. I quickly looked away, flustered. Why was I nervous? The Shaws immediately recognized Grace. Their expressions changed, losing some of their arrogance and turning stiff with forced politeness. But Aaron could not hold back. She let out a scoff and clung to the idea of me being a so-called writer. What a joke, a country girl. An author. Even if you are a Miss Chu, you should check the trash before you start defending it. Grace gave me a calm, reassuring look, then turned to Aaron with eyes as cold as ice. "Miss Zhao is someone I personally signed 4 years ago. Her exclusive interview is set to be published soon. Perhaps you will see it then. As for those study materials, when I learned she was preparing for college, I sent her several packages myself." She paused, then added with biting sarcasm, "And now the Shaw family wants to act like a few hundred yuan and a couple of notebooks saved the Zhao family from ruin. That is just laughable." The Shaws looked stunned, frozen in place with no real way to respond. Aaron kept mumbling, trying to insist we were making it all up. But by then, the rest of the diners had already taken in the full drama. All eyes were now on the Shaws, not us. Every word Grace said was laced with disdain, her tone completely dismissive. Mr. and Mrs. Shaw, who probably had never been publicly challenged in their lives, sat rigid and silent. clearly humiliated but unable to push back. Then my father emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. If I had known my daughter would be treated like this just for saving someone's life, he said, voice steady, I would have left him on that mountain. Let nature decide. He must have overheard everything while working in the back. Ethan Shaw opened his mouth, his face full of shame and frustration. I am sorry, Mr. Zhao, but my father cut him off, meeting his eyes with calm defiance. I hear you are a colonel, that is fine. But our family left the countryside through our daughter's own efforts. It had nothing to do with your Shaw family. If you think you can smear us, look down on us, or bully us, then I swear I will go straight to the central government and find someone who will speak up for people like us. I had never seen my father stand so tall. His voice was steady, but I noticed the faint trembling in his hand and felt a bittersweet wave of pride. The Shaws must have realized they were losing control of the situation. If they pushed any further, it might spiral into something bigger. Mr. Shaw turned to Aaron and told her to apologize. She dragged her feet, glaring at me like she wanted to tear me apart, but eventually she mumbled, sorry, save it for the police, I said coolly. I planned to press charges for the defamation at school. Without waiting for a reply, I turned and walked out, leaving the entire Shaw family to sit in their own silence and frustration. From the corner, I caught Yvonne Yarrow watching me. Her expression was just as scornful as Aaron's, her eyes full of judgment. Outside, Grace caught up with me. Wait, she called out, jogging after me with her bag in one hand and Daniel Chu following behind. I just remembered something, she said suddenly. And without any explanation, she darted off again, leaving me alone with Daniel. He glanced at me. Come on, I will take you home. I suddenly remembered I had come here to eat, trying to find an excuse. I said, I left my food inside, it is not far, I will walk. Before I could turn, Ethan appeared and gently grabbed my wrist. I need to talk to you, he said, let's go eat somewhere else. My heart jumped. What could he possibly want to talk about? I had already told Grace to pass along everything I needed him to know. I had also made it clear I would handle the orphanage job myself when I had time. There was no need for anything more. I was still trying to gather my thoughts when I found myself sitting across from him at a hot pot restaurant. I had somehow agreed without realizing it. When he finally spoke, I nearly stopped breathing. He told me he wanted to pursue a relationship with me. He was serious. He was not joking or being vague. He was talking about something real, with marriage as the goal. While he was saying all this, I accidentally bit into a piece of raw meat covered in peppercorn and started coughing violently. He reached out and gently supported my chin, trying to help. My face burned with embarrassment. Hot enough to cook the meat on its own. Panicked, I grabbed his hand and spat the meat into it. To his credit, Ethan did not even flinch. He calmly handed me a glass of water. I was stunned. Was this really the same neat freak Grace always complained about? Did he really like me that much? After a pause, I finally said it. I do not think we are a good match. I had no idea those words would come back to haunt me. From that day on, Daniel Chu began a full-fledged pursuit. He introduced me to his friends, brought his family to dine at Shan, had his mother custom order clothes for me, and sent one gift after another to my house. Grace became a frequent visitor. Grinning every time she stopped by, he is definitely into you, she would say. She even told me how surprised she was when Ethan, who usually avoided anything troublesome, had gone out of his way to find and send me study materials. You two were probably fated. She joked, and honestly, I had a hard time resisting. A handsome man who treated me kindly, who only had eyes for me. It was hard not to be moved. Eventually, I said yes. When we officially became a couple, Ethan finally told me about all the times he had seen me before. The first time, he said, it was dark. I just thought you had a great figure. The second time, I thought you were beautiful. The third time, I realized you were both adorable and incredibly frustrating. And by the fourth time, at the restaurant, I knew you were mine. I had thought his words were ridiculous, but when I looked up and saw the fierce determination in his eyes, I could not bring myself to argue. He had this way of pulling me in, making everything else fade away. Then Ethan Shaw appeared again. I had no idea how he found my house, but when I saw him standing at the gate, he looked stunned, like he had not expected to see me there. "Why do I feel like you really hate me?" he asked. "Maybe because you're just a little too full of yourself," I replied, my tone dry. He apologized again, this time on behalf of his sister. He said that from the first moment he saw me, he felt something different, but before he could go on, Daniel Chu stepped out of the house, took my hand, and gently pulled me away. Ethan stood there, watching as we walked off together, not saying another word. Aaron Shaw ended up getting arrested after I reported her to the police. At first, she refused to apologize, but when she realized her father had chosen not to step in and that she might actually go to jail, she finally broke down, crying and dragging her feet. She issued a public apology over the school's broadcast using her real name. After that, whenever I ran into her on campus, she would still glare at me, but she always turned and walked away quickly. Still, there was one time she just could not help herself. She stormed over and hissed, "Daniel Chu is going to dump you eventually. There is no way you two are getting married." Then she stomped off, clearly proud of what she had said. I sometimes wonder what her expression was like when she found out we got married right after graduation. Honestly, I owed much of the peace in my life to Daniel Chu. If it had not been for him, the Shaw family would have kept finding ways to make my life miserable. He shielded me from all of it. Grace once told me that Aaron probably always had it out for me because Ethan had told their family he wanted to marry me. That might have been why they all disliked me so much. Grace had only heard it secondhand, though she was not sure of the full story, but I knew enough. The Shaw family had a way of twisting everything to suit their version of the truth. On our wedding day, Ethan Shaw showed up again. He told me, once more, that he still believed I was the love of his life. Daniel Chu nearly had him thrown into the river right then and there. Sometimes, my past life felt like a distant, faded dream, while the joy I had in this one felt almost too good to be real, except, of course, for those moments when Daniel would pin me down in bed, looking straight into my eyes and asking again and again, "So, do you still think we are not a good match?" Every single time, I wanted to curl up from the embarrassment, and sometimes I genuinely thought about just playing dead to make it stop. In this life, I got to rewrite everything. I walked hand in hand with my parents through streets we never imagined we would live on, watching them smile in ways I had never seen back in the village. My mother's dresses were now worn by elegant women in the city, each one stitched with her name inside the tag. My father's food had become a sensation. People waited in long lines for weeks just to taste what he made with care and pride. And me, I published my first novel before graduation. I stood in bookstores and saw my name on the cover, watched strangers flip through my pages like they mattered. Because they did. I married a man who not only loved me, but truly respected me. Daniel Chu never asked me to shrink myself. He never wanted me to be less. He stood by my side when others doubted me, spoke up when they insulted me, and believed in me long before I ever learned to believe in myself. Sometimes I still dreamed about that other life, the one where I was invisible, where my voice did not matter, where love was conditional and always wrapped in silence. But every time I woke up next to Daniel, with sunlight slipping softly across our sheets, I reminded myself, this time, I chose differently. I chose to speak. I chose to leave. I chose myself. And because of that, I chose a future that belonged entirely to me. No more borrowed names, no more borrowed strength. This time, I lived boldly. I loved freely, and I never, ever looked back. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so feel free to share your opinions, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories. We'll see you in the next video.